Welcome to our quantum deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into the really fascinating world of nitrogen vacancy centers in diamonds, NV centers.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing structures.
We're basing this on an insightful essay by Jorgo Schneeppet. And, well, our mission is basically to pull out the key nuggets about these things.
Sounds good. Schneeppet's work does a great job laying out these specific flaws, really, in the diamond lattice.
Right, not just any flaw. It's where a nitrogen atom replaces a carbon.
Exactly. And crucially, there's a missing carbon atom right next door, a vacancy.
Oh, this tiny defect, this NV center, it unlocks some, well, pretty remarkable quantum behavior.
It really does. Schneeppet talks about the two main types, the neutral one, NV0, but it's the negatively charged one, NV-, that gets all the attention for quantum tech.
And why is that? What's special about NV-?
Well, as Schneeppet points out, it has these unique optical and electronic properties. You can actually manipulate and measure the spin of a single electron.
A single electron spin. And you can do that at room temperature.
That's the kicker, yes.
Yeah.
At room temperature, which is, quite something.
Definitely. So Schneeppet's essay covers the fundamentals, how they're made, and the tech applications, right?
Precisely. That's the plan for our deep dive today.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. The diamond itself, we know it's super hard, chemically stable, transparent.
All down to that cubic crystal structure, the strong covalent bonds between carbon atoms.
And it has that big band gap, what is it, about 5.5 electron volts?
Yeah, around there. That large gap is key to its transparency and electrical insulation, but it also provides a stable home for these NV defects, as Schneeppet explains.
So the diamond structure itself kind of protects the NV center.
In a way, yes. The nitrogen substitutes a carbon, sits next to that vacancy, and it forms a stable configuration within the rigid lattice. And we can create them deliberately.
How? Through irradiation?
That's one way, yeah. Or ion implantation, followed by heating, annealing.
Got it. So back to the NV- state. You mentioned the electron spin.
Right. Schneeppet highlights this. The NV- center has an unpaired electron with a total spin quantum number S1. Think of it like a tiny magnet.
Okay, a quantum magnet.
And crucially, we can interact with this tiny magnet using light. We can detect its state, its orientation, optically.
Which leads to that characteristic red light they emit, around 637 nanometers.
Exactly. That fluorescence is directly linked to the spin state. It's like a little optical reporter telling us what the spin is doing.
And that's the basis for ODMR.
Precisely. Optically detected magnetic resonance. You shine a laser, you apply microwaves at the right frequency to flip the spin.
And the brightness of the red light changes.
You got it. That change tells you you've hit the resonance, tells you about the spin state. Schneeppet emphasizes how sensitive this is. Plus, they're very photostable, they don't bleach easily.
And they can emit single photons too, right? One at a time.
Yes, which is super important for quantum communication and things like that.
Okay, so how do scientists actually, make these things reliably? It's not like they just appear in jewelry diamonds.
No, not usually in the concentrations or locations we need. Schneeppet details the main methods. First, you can use nitrogen implantation.
Firing nitrogen atoms into the diamond?
Basically, yes, in a very controlled way. Then, crucially, you heat the diamond up annealing, usually around 800 degrees Celsius.
Why the heating?
The implantation creates damage and puts nitrogen in. The annealing helps create vacancies and allows the nitrogen atoms and vacancies to find each other and form stable NV centers.
Okay, implantation and annealing. What's the other main route?
Irradiation. You hit the diamond with high-energy particles, like electrons or ions.
To knock carbon atoms out.
Exactly. That creates the vacancies directly. Then you still need the annealing step afterwards to stabilize the NV centers, pairing the vacancies with nitrogen atoms that might already be in the diamond or were introduced separately.
Are there ways to make this process better? Get higher quality NV centers. Schneeppet mentions optimization.
Oh, yes. Control is key. For implantation, you control the energy precisely to place the nitrogen at the right depth and minimize damage.
And the annealing.
Temperature and time are critical there, too. Too hot or too long, and things can diffuse too much. Too short? You don't form enough stable centers.
Makes sense.
And importantly, Schneeppet points out the advantage of using high-purity synthetic diamonds, especially those grown by chemical vapor deposition, CVD.
Why CVD diamonds?
They have far fewer natural impurities, especially nitrogen, unless you add it intentionally. It gives you a much cleaner starting point for engineering the NV centers exactly where and how you want them.
Right, a cleaner canvas. Okay, let's dig into the key physical properties. You mentioned ESR and ODMR for probing them.
Yes, electron spin resonance and optically detected magnetic resonance. ESR is the more traditional way to look at electron spins using microwaves.
But ODMR is better for NV centers.
It's incredibly powerful for them, as Schneepat emphasizes, because the optical signal, the fluorescence, is so strongly linked to the spin state. It gives us a much more sensitive way to detect tiny numbers of spins, even a single one.
Okay, sensitivity is the key. Now, Schneepat includes that equation, the Hamiltonian. H equals D SCSCS plus DEC ESA. Looks a bit daunting.
It does, but it just describes the energy levels of the spin. The D term, the DSCSC, is the zero field splitting.
Meaning, even with no magnetic field, the spin states have different energies.
Exactly. About 2.87 gigahertz apart. It's due to the crystal environment. The second term, D's ESA, tells you how those energy levels shift and split further when you apply an external magnetic field. B's, that's the Zeeman effect.
So D is the baseline splitting, and the magnetic field term lets you tune the levels further.
Precisely. DEC is just the gyromagnetic ratio, a constant for the electron spin. This equation is basically our instruction manual for controlling the NV spin with magnetic fields and microwaves.
Got it. Now, stability. You said room temperature operation is a big plus.
Huge plus. Makes them much more practical than many other quantum systems that need extreme cold. Schneepat definitely highlights this.
But there are trade-offs, right? Coherence times.
Yes. Coherence time, T, is how long the delicate quantum state survives before fuzzing out due to noise from the environment, like thermal vibrations or fluctuating magnetic fields.
And room temperature means more noise.
Generally, yes. So at room temp, T might be up to, say, 100 microseconds, maybe a millisecond in really good samples, which is already pretty long for a solid-state qubit at room temp.
But colder is better for coherence.
Definitely. Go down to cryogenic temperatures, you drastically reduce that noise, and coherence times can get much longer. Allows for more complex quantum operations.
Okay, so this leads us nicely into the quantum phenomena and applications Schneepat discusses, using them as qubits.
Exactly. The S1 spin state of the NV- center gives you 3 levels. You can pick 2 of these to represent your quantum bit, your 0 and 1 state, plus their superpositions.
And that coherence time, TRO, is critical here. Why?
Well, think of it like the working memory time for your quantum calculation. The longer T, the more quantum operations or gates you can perform before the quantum information degrades. Schneepat gives that decay formula, C, D, definitely T. Longer T means slower decay.
So we need them stable long enough to compute. How do we actually control these NV qubits? You mentioned microwaves and light.
Right. We use carefully timed microwave pulses tuned near that 2.87 gigahertz splitting or the Zeeman shifted frequencies to flip the spin between the chosen qubit states. That's how we perform quantum gates.
And the laser.
The laser is used first to initialize the spin into a known starting state, usually the 0 state. And then, after the microwave operations, we use another laser pulse to read out the final state by looking at the fluorescence intensity. Bright means one state, dimmer means the other.
So microwaves to manipulate, laser to initialize and read, and the magnetic field helps tune things.
Yes, the external magnetic field, via that Zeeman effect in the Hamiltonian, lets us fine-tune the energy levels, making it easier to target specific transitions with the microwaves.
Incredible control at such a tiny scale. Schneepat also really emphasizes their sensitivity, particularly to magnetic fields.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of their superpowers. Those spin energy levels shift measurably in response to even incredibly weak magnetic fields.
How weak are we talking?
Schneepat mentions nanotesla sensitivity. Maybe even better. Picotesla in some cases. For context, the Earth's magnetic field is tens of microteslas, so orders of magnitude weaker.
Wow. And electric fields, too.
Electric fields affect them too, though more indirectly, often by slightly shifting the optical transition energies rather than the spin levels directly. But yes, sensitive to both makes them amazing sensors.
And also as single photon sources. You mentioned that earlier.
Yes. When you excite an NV center with a laser, it can reliably emit exactly 1 photon at a time around that 637 millimeter wavelength.
Why is emitting just 1 photon so important?
For secure quantum communication, you need to send information encoded in single quanta of light. If your source sometimes spits out 2 photons, an eavesdropper could potentially intercept one without you knowing. NV centers are good single photon emitters.
And Schneepat mentions spin photon entanglement.
Right. You can link the spin state of the NV center to the properties, like polarization of the photon it emits. This entanglement is fundamental for building things like quantum repeaters to extend the range of quantum communication and for networking quantum devices. And again, their photostability is a big plus here.
So, sensors and communication building blocks. Let's look at specific applications, Schnepp details. Magnetometry first. That nanotesla sensitivity, what can you do with that?
Schnepp gives examples like studying magnetic nanoparticles or mapping the magnetic domains in advanced materials with nanoscale resolution.
And in biology.
That's really exciting. People are working on using NV centers to measure the tiny magnetic fields produced by firing neurons, for example, potentially mapping brain activity at a cellular level, or detecting magnetic signals from biological processes inside cells.
That sounds revolutionary. What about temperature sensing? How does that work?
Schnepp explains that the zero field splitting, that D's value, actually changes slightly with temperature. It has a known temperature dependence, roughly negative 74 kilohertz per Kelvin.
So if you measure D very precisely using ODMR,
you can calculate the local temperature. And because the NV center is so small, you can get temperature maps with incredible spatial resolution. Think nanoscale thermal imaging inside a chip or even a living cell.
Tiny quantum thermometers.
Okay, moving to broader impacts, biomedical applications.
Schnepp pulls several threads together here. The high-resolution imaging potential, using that spin-dependent fluorescence. The magnetometry for neuroimaging or tracking molecules labeled with nanodiamonds containing NV centers.
And importantly, Schnepp stresses they're biocompatible, right? Yes, diamond itself is very inert and non-toxic. So diamond nanoparticles with NV centers are seen as much safer for use in biological systems compared to, say, traditional fluorescent dyes or some semiconductor or quantum dots, which can have toxicity issues. Plus, they don't blink or bleach easily.
Huge advantages for in vivo work. What about materials science?
Schnepp highlights their role as nanoscale probes, analyzing atomic structures, finding tiny defects in semiconductors or metals, mapping magnetic fields and spintronic devices, basically using the NV center as a local sensor to understand material properties at a fundamental level.
Like a non-invasive atomic force microscope, but sensitive to quantum properties.
That's a good analogy in some ways, yes. And he mentions nanoscale NMR again, using NV centers near a sample to detect the nuclear spins of molecules, offering a way to do NMR on incredibly small volumes.
And even measuring the Earth's field, you said?
Yeah, for high-precision, localized geomagnetic sensing.
Okay, lastly, quantum communication and computing prospects. Integration into quantum computers.
Schnepp touches on this. NV centers are definitely candidates for qubits. They have decent coherence times, especially when cooled, and optical control and readout is convenient. People are exploring hybrid systems too.
Hybrid, like connecting NV centers to other quantum platforms.
Exactly. Maybe linking them via photons to superconducting qubits or trapped ions, trying to combine the best features of different systems.
And their role in making quantum communications scalable, quantum repeaters.
That single photon emission and the potential for spin-photon entanglement are key, as Schnepp reiterates. They could form the nodes in future quantum networks, enabling secure communication over long distances and connecting distributed quantum computers, essential for quantum cryptography.
It paints an amazing picture, but as Schnepp acknowledges, it's not all smooth sailing. There are challenges.
Oh, definitely. Manufacturing's a big one. Making NV centers exactly where you want them, with the right properties, and doing it reliably and scalably. That's tough. Atomic precision is the goal, but we're not quite there for large-scale production.
Controlling the density, avoiding unwanted defects.
Right. And then there's stability. We mentioned coherence being affected by noise, but also the charge state can be unstable. The NV center can sometimes flip between the desired ND- and the neutral NV0 state.
Which would mess up its function as a qubit or sensor?
It can, yes. So maintaining charge state stability, especially near surfaces or in complex environments, is another active research area.
But Schnepp ends on an optimistic note, looking forward.
Absolutely. He points to continued progress in atomic scale fabrication techniques, better CVD diamond growth.
Getting closer to building these quantum systems atom by atom.
That's the dream. And he stresses the interdisciplinary nature, quantum optics, materials science, bioengineering, all coming together. That synergy is really driving innovation.
So the takeaway is that NV centers are this incredible bridge.
Yeah, I think Schnepp really makes that case well. They connect fundamental quantum physics with, potentially transformative real-world technologies from medicine to computing.
A key enabling technology for the quantum future.
Precisely. Challenges remain, but the progress is rapid, and the potential impact is just enormous.
Well, that's a fantastic place to wrap up our deep dive into nitrogen vacancy centers, guided by the work of Jorgo Schneeppot. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Fascinating topic.